Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to today's segment of Muslim Network TV. This is your host, Edward Ahmed Mitchell. I hope all of you are doing well. Today, we're going to be discussing something that I know all of you have been paying attention to, and that is protests on college campuses against the ongoing genocide in Gaza and against the complicity of universities in the Israeli government's human rights abuses against the Palestinian people. Obviously, we've seen many protests happen across our country against the genocide over the past 6 months, but it seems in recent weeks there's been a spike in protests on college campuses, sit-ins, modeling things that happened during the civil rights movement, where students are just, occupying land on their campuses and demanding change right here and now. This has obviously caused a lot of blowback from anti-Palestinian groups, from political leaders. It's led to some threats against these students, harassment, doxing, and other such things. Muslim students, Jewish students, Palestinian students, and others. To discuss what is happening at Rutgers University, I want to bring on our special guest, Chaplain Kaiser Aslam, who is going to tell us about what is happening there at that very important institution. Assalamu alaikum, Chaplain. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, doing well.
Good, good. Thank you so much for joining us. So, first, tell us, what's been going on at Rutgers University. We know there was an attack, a vandalism of your Islamic center there. We know there's a long history of protests there. Just give us kind of a lay of the land. What's been happening at Rutgers University over the past several weeks?
Sure, it's an honor to be on, so thank you for having me. And there's quite a bit that's been going on. We were hit with a hate crime that's now been officially charged as a hate crime on April 10th, on Eid Day, in which our Center for Islamic Life, where I'm sitting right now in my office, was vandalized, and a lot of our artwork and pieces were destroyed. And we really took this as a consequence of our pro-Palestinian advocacy. Our center on campus has been the space for Palestinian students and those who are advocating for Palestine, of course, in perpetuity since we've been established, but much more since October 7th. And the situations on campuses is just like this, where when students are actually activated and willing to advocate and try to make a change at their university, on our campus particularly, our students have used every means at their disposal, asking student government to pass divestment or do a referendum to see if the students are going to be for divestment, and that passed just a few weeks ago. That almost with an 80% approval that students want the university itself, its endowment, to divest from all investments that benefit from the apartheid state. And to divest from Tel Aviv University, which has supported pro-settler policies. So we see it as a retaliation from that, and students are facing it on a day-to-day level. And even the attack on our center, we're saying that it has to be a consequence of that.
So, this is something that is, I think, unique at Rutgers, is that you have a very thriving, not only Muslim student body, but you have actual institutions there, like the Center for, I think, Policy, and there's, I can't remember the name of it. You have a center there led by Professor Saraziz that does a lot of work on issues related to Islamophobia. Obviously, you are, I think, the first full-time Muslim chaplain at a public university in the United States. So a lot of history being made there for Muslim students. So in general, how welcoming would you say Rutgers is to Muslim students? Is it welcoming aside from this issue? Is this what has caused kind of a breach? Tell me about that.
And I think just like in almost every other institution, Palestine is the litmus test, or pro-Palestinian advocacy is the litmus test for so many principles like free speech. And the same thing can be said for the Muslim community. The Muslim community has generally been welcomed here at Rutgers. And that's the reason why we have probably the largest population of Muslims anywhere in the country in terms of on a campus. And of course, we have a lot of Muslim faculty and staff as well. Sarah Aziz is a great colleague who's been doing amazing work. We have Maya Mikdashi, Sylvia Chan Malik. We have lots of groundbreaking faculty who've been supporting of our Muslim students here on campus. But when it comes to Palestine advocacy, there's so much pressure from pro-Zionist groups that we're finding that policies aren't being fairly implemented, that our students are being unfairly retaliated against, and our students at times are being silenced in very direct ways and sometimes in subtle ways as well.
So what advice are you giving to students about how to navigate these issues? I mean, these are college kids who are dealing with very serious issues, and the eyes of the nation are on them, and they've got detractors with a lot of financial, political, media support who are going after them if they advocate for Palestine. So, what advice are you giving students about how to navigate their studies, their personal lives, their spirituality, and the school itself?
Yeah.
What advice do you give?
As a chaplain, first and foremost, my role here is to provide support to my students as best that I can, and I care about their holistic selves. So, of course, on a spiritual level, making sure that they're grounded through both their activism and also, of course, grounded because of the retaliation that they're facing. And it's a balancing act because our university, alhamdulillah, I'm proud to say that Rutgers was among the first public universities, or the first public university to divest from apartheid South Africa. That we want to continue that tradition of actually leading the way, so promoting their activism, but also making sure that they have the safety precautions that they need. That this is finals time for our students, so make sure that they're continuing to do that, making sure that they're protected in common sense protection elements of like if we are going to do an act of activism like an encampment, making sure we've made the partnerships that we can with the faculty and staff so that they have us in support. We're getting actually a team of faculty together to have a statement of support to our students, that we're willing to come and actually sit with them as well, making sure that those in the administration that we have good relationships with also are going to advocate on our behalf. And then for the greater Muslim community to also come together, there's a role that alumni need to play, there's a role that the general community needs to play, and everyone's on the same page here, so that if when the inevitable retaliation does take place or limitations are being put forward on us, that we're going to face it as a united front. So that's on one level to the students, is making sure that they're grounded through this. That's why even at our activities, you'll see conversations about, well, how to take care of yourselves, how to make sure to communicate with your family members on what's happening today, and do a risk assessment. I also happen to be in conversations with my other colleagues. I spoke with my colleague at Columbia, and massive du'as to him and his community right now, and my colleagues at Yale as well. And we're trying to understand what will we as the Association of Muslim Chaplains put together so that students know how to be active, take care of themselves personally, but also how to have a risk assessment of when is it that I can be active and when is it that maybe it might be a good idea to leave this for our alumni community or our other community and not necessarily the student community.
Absolutely. It seems to me, my observation, Chaplain, is that in the first months of the genocide, major Muslim, Jewish, and other organizations were leading very structured protests,
Hmm.
and they were following the rules. It was very, getting permits, and it was very, very controlled. And sadly, our political leaders didn't listen. They didn't stop the genocide. They kept it going. And now you have a younger generation, college kids, that said, look, we've had enough. We're going to take matters into our own hands. And you have these very organic, seemingly decentralized protests, sit-ins that have popped up. And they're demanding much more than a ceasefire. They're demanding divestment, all sorts of things. And it somewhat reminds me of the civil rights movement when Dr. King and other leaders initially were, leading these very, very calm protests, being very, very docile, asking for the bare minimum. And when young people were not satisfied with the pace of change, you had a new generation who started new groups that were much more aggressive and direct in their protest tactics. What's your observation of where this is going? The school year is almost over, but it does seem like we've got a generation of young Muslims here who are very bold, do not seem to be afraid of getting doxxed, losing out on career opportunities. Just give us an assessment of this generation of young Muslims, how you think they're doing, and where you think they're going.
Yeah. I'm very proud of our students. They are leading the way that many of our communities need to follow, actually.
Mhm.
And exactly what you mentioned, that this is a new generation that has been raised on the idea of being activated. This is a generation that went through COVID. This is a generation that viewed Black Lives Matter as matters as it was maturing in its movement. So this is a new generation that we're dealing with, and you're absolutely correct. They tried submitting a letter to the university to say, hey, when you talk about Israel and Palestine, please try to say the word Palestine. Please try to humanize their voices. They tried that, and when that has repeatedly not happened, this is where they're being pushed to. But even in with all of that, I have to mention that every rally, vigil, art demonstration that I've seen, you have someone from the organization come up and say, our movement is not about anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a problem, and we are not going to continue with that problem. We're actually addressing it. But what we're advocating for is against policies of genocide. That is not anti-Semitism. And so they'll go out of their way to, even in their moments of protest, which are filled with emotion, anger, grief, all of these things, they're doing what they can to make sure that their messaging is properly communicated and experienced by those who are within the protest. Of course, on the other side, you have the coverage of their protests and activism. You'll find one person who no one seems to know who shouts something idiotic, and that gets covered as like, look, this is what this entire protest is about.
Right.
So I'm actually very proud of our students, and I think many of us from the greater community should actually come and support our students in recognizing what they're doing, because in many ways they have these amazing best practices that we should take back to our forms of activism even outside of the campus.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because we have seen this pattern of unidentified, sometimes masked individuals popping up out of nowhere and just saying crazy things, anti Semitic things that do not reflect at all what the protesters are saying or what the protest is about. And the media will zone in on that one person and say, aha, you see, that's what it's
Yeah.
about. It's transparently dishonest. And so,
And one
yeah,
And one more thing I'll mention about
yeah,
this is one of the beautiful things is in the early months of subhanallah, calling it the early months of a genocide just feels so,
right.
it's
Yeah,
hard to even say, but in the early months of this, it was primarily the Arab and Muslim students who were coming together. Now what you're finding is at any of these events, over 50 to 70% will be non-Muslim, non-Arab students who are present, and that's beautiful to see, because it's been a coalition of the Black student community, the undocumented student community, and many Jewish students as well who are coming forward, and that speaks to the idea that this is pure justice we're talking about. This is not because of one affinity or another.
yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I think we're seeing on the campuses. The only question is, will our media outlets show it? Maybe not, but that's why we have Muslim Network TV here to show it at the least. Chaplain, I want to thank you for your time and for your service to the students at Rutgers. We look forward to having you back in the future, hopefully to discuss progress in the struggle to protect free speech and to free Palestine, inshallah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu
Oh, yeah.
alaikum wa
Walaikum assalam. Thank you all so much for joining us for this segment of Muslim Network TV. We will see you again next time, inshallah. Please keep in touch with your young people, your children, your friends, and let them know they've got your support if they're on a college campus. Keep in touch with them, and we'll see what happens in the coming weeks, inshallah. Thank you all so much. Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you.